Okay.
Come on.
We've been talking about the book of Ruth, and some of my summary may not sound like we've gone over it, but if you really look inside yourself, we have. Ruth, the root of the word Ruth is friendship, but if you follow it down a little bit more, it means apple of my eye. I knew that's another rendition of that. What that means, apple of my eye, friendship.
2,000 years ago, someone was coining a phrase like that? Okay.
No, they were saying rude friendship, but if you follow it down, they probably, I mean, it's like stuff we say today. We didn't know where it came from. Elimelech, remember, was my God is king. Naomi was my delight, pleasantness, or, you know, the sweetness of God. It's another way to look at it. So, Boaz, we couldn't find a rendition of his name before, but as I looked at some of the other studies, some of them talk about the name meaning in him is my strength. In him is strength.
That makes sense.
So, you have Ruth, who is the daughter-in-law of Naomi, the sweetness of God, or in my delight. So my delight told the apple of her eye, Ruth, that we gotta find a place of rest for you. All right? And so I'm not gonna go through all of it. K-Man!
How you doing?
And so, I'm not going to go through all of the summary of that, but just to highlight some things. And so, Ruth, the apple of her mother-in-law's eye, her daughter-in-law, goes to glean in the fields of in him is strength. Boaz. Got to remember that Ruth came from Moab, which means her mother's father, because she is she's down the generation, a product of the incestual relationship of Lot and his oldest daughter. So she's a foreigner. She even calls herself a foreigner. Ruth 2:2 says Ruth spoke of herself as a Moabite. Ruth 2:6, Ruth 2:10, Ruth 2:11, Ruth 2:13, Ruth 2:21. So, I mean, over and over and over. And that's why you see that word Moabitess all throughout Ruth for up till a point. Because it's saying that she was perceived as a foreigner outside of the assembly of the Jews at that time, a different country. And so this book is, you know, you can peel back so many layers. It's so beautiful because it's an archetype of the relationship that we talked about last time, or a foreshadowing of the Messiah and the relationship that we have, the love story that we have as being grafted into the body of Messiah. If you also remember, we talked about, and that's a foreigner, that's an outsider, outside of the usual people who were defined as God's people at the time. You follow what I'm saying? The Israelites, in a sense. I also told you that it is said that Rahab is the mother of Boaz. Now, I don't know what Rahab means. I forgot to look at that. Well, you remember Rahab is the one who helped the spies when they came to Jericho, and she helped them escape. She was known as a harlot at the time, but she helped them escape. And even Rahab, in a sense, was grafted into, quote unquote, the then body of the Jews, the Israelites. Following me? Another outside, in a sense, who becomes and is accepted as one of them if she marries Salmon, who's Boaz's father, which is a big deal, because back then you had folk, the prophets, everybody preaching, do not marry these women, do not marry the Moabites, do not marry the Ammonites, who's another descendant of Lot, through his other daughter. I mean, big time. Ezra, all of those folk were talking about that. And so you would think, the Jewish people have carried on their tradition for thousands of years, hundreds of years probably, well, thousands of years even back then. And yet this happens, in spite of the thou shalt not marry so-and-so. That wasn't God, that was the prophets. There you have Rahab. Now we're talking about Ruth, okay? So, Deuteronomy talks about the Moabites and how the Moabites shouldn't even come into the assembly of the Israelites for 10 generations and forever and ever. That was in Deuteronomy 23:3. So, I mean, if you want to just go back and make sure I'm on track, that's fine. And yet here we are with Ruth gleaning, Ruth the friend, the apple of Naomi's eye, who is the sweetness of God, gleaning in the field of Boaz, whose name is in him is straight. All right. So it is an archetypal or foreshadow. Boaz is an archetypal Jesus, the Redeemer. You can look at Naomi even when she called herself Mara, because she said, I'm bitter because my God is king, is no longer here, is dead. My husband is dead. My sons are dead. And it's almost like a foreshadowing of the Shekinah being separated from the Most High, in a sense, being subjugated to the lower realm, if you will, apart from the one she really loves. Okay, so that's another way to look at it. Ruth, being a Moabite, is the archetype of people outside of the Israelites' body. Can you see that? So, Ruth is about more than this young woman who went to this field and found favor in the eyes of the guy who owned the field, and she found so much favor that he ended up not only giving her food, but giving her protection and marrying her. It's about more than that. And that's where the summary ends, I believe, and we start with, I do want to talk about what they were doing at the time. Why now? If you remember, Naomi and her husband Elimelech, God is my king, went because there was a famine in the land, Bethlehem, Judah, which means house of bread. There was famine in the house of bread, so that they went to the country of Moab. Now, everybody didn't go, remember? Ruth went, I'm sorry, Naomi and Elimelech went, their sons went, but there were some other people who stayed in Bethlehem, Judah. So now here it is, years later, Ruth is by herself with her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law hears, Naomi hears, well, the famine's over now. I got to go back to the house of bread. My people are there. So she tries to get her daughter-in-law to stay where they are. She says, I can't have any more sons. If I did, could you wait long enough for them to get old enough so that you could marry them? She was saying, in essence, I don't have anything to offer you. And so she was trying to get them to stay in Moab. Now, two different ones, Orpah, who married the younger son, and Ruth, who married the older son. Orpah really was a good-hearted person. She lived with Ruth and Elimelech Naomi and Elimelech, just like Ruth had. She's a good-hearted person. But when it came down to when the bottom line, are you going to stay or are you going to go? Naomi gave her so many reasons to stay. Look, you could find another husband. You could find a place. You could get a home here. You could marry. You could have children. Orpah finally decided, okay, I'll stay. But not Ruth. Ruth says, ain't having it. I'm with you. And that beautiful piece that, don't beg me to leave you. I mean, I am not going to do it. I hear what you say. I understand what you say. I understand I'm going to be a foreigner in your country, in a sense. And I understand my role is going to be that of servant in your country. But I'm not staying here. He glimpsed what Naomi represented. And she wanted to cleave to that. She would not give it up. She refused to give it up. That's what this is about. And is that not how, what happens when we who have not come to an awareness of who we really are? Is that not what when we first get that, we are just on fire? There's nothing you can say or do. I'm on this road now and I'm going. Things happen, but I'm on this road now and I'm going, in a sense. All right. So she goes with her. We're in 3:12 now. I said all that to say what was happening at the time. She heard that there was food in the land now. And it so happened when they came back, this was the time of there were total 7 festivals of the Messiah, but 3 of those festivals God told them to, that they should observe. And they came back during the festival when the barley was yielding. Okay? Barley was the first crop. Somebody asked about these different crops last time. Barley was the first crop. And it's sown in November, thereabout, and harvested in April sometime. It's the first grain to ripen in spring. The thing about barley is it will grow just about anywhere. It doesn't need a lot of nourishment to grow. The wheat was the second crop, and it grew 4 to 6 weeks. It ripened, it matured 4 to 6 weeks after the barley did. So at the end of the barley season, they had a festival. And the festival was called the Festival of, I think it was the Passover. It's the Feast of the Passover. That's what they called it. And if you remember what the Passover is, it's when the lambs were slain in Egypt, and the blood of the lamb was put on the doorpost of the Jews, so that this plague, one of the plagues that Moses talked about, that of death, would pass over the foe. And so from that point on, the Jews celebrated the festival of the Passover. Well, let's look at barley just a minute. Barley is a sheaf of barley. Usually what they do is they cut the thing down here, and it would be, and they would put a stack together and bind it together, and that's called a sheaf. So a sheaf of barley is what the priest would come to, and then they would examine it to make sure it was ripe and ready, because barley, this is what they did to offer the first fruits to the Lord, or to the priest, symbolically to the Lord. And if the priest says, yep, it's right, barley season was in, and they started harvesting. And so, what we know about barley then, it's the sheaf used as the offering of the first fruit in the Feast of the Passover. And Pastor, if you see anything else, please. Of course, that's like saying don't talk, because you can't do it. Anyway, it was a neat grain, because as I said, it grew in spite of a lot of things. It didn't take a lot of rain. It didn't need the latter rains that a lot of the plantings needed. It didn't need all of that. matured early. It was almost completely free of pests, things like that, because it didn't need all the rain, which, you know, if something happens, then the mold was set. It didn't happen with barley. And so it was completely free of the pests. Does it remind you of the Passover lamb that has to be unblemished and not without spot or stain? Barley was that kind of product. The first fruits in the body were linked with Christ because we are also a kind of first fruit. We are referred to as first fruits, in a sense. So all of this is a foreshadowing of the Messiah. Years and years and years later. So what the Jewish people were doing in living these through the book of Ruth is it just opened these festivals up to show us what was coming down the pipe years and years and years later.
Boaz.
Yeah.
You first.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what you said about first fruits and
Yeah.
the fact that barley can grow in such harsh conditions. And what can we extrapolate from that?
Well, let me finish a little bit, and maybe it'll work itself out, and you can tell us what it means. And also, barley is one of those things that the shaft separates from the fruit very easily. It separates. You remember last time we were talking about winnowing? All you got to do is throw it up. If it's matured, all you got to do is throw it up in the air, and the gentle wind just separates it, just like that. It's not like grapes you gotta. It's not like wheat you gotta. It's that kind of fruit. Okay. So now I forgot your question. What can I get from the fact that barley is the first fruit? It provides sustenance. It's the thing that it's one of those. The crops represent the nourishment. It represents the God who nourishes the people, and so it's part of the ceremony of offerings. If you remember in Cain and Abram, even way back then and there, they offered first fruits even back there, where Abram's first fruit was his first fruit from what he grew in the land. It was God's, in a sense. That's it.
Barley, doesn't matter how harsh things are in your life. It doesn't matter how difficult they may appear. There's always nourishment there. Barley represents that, in that it does not take any efforts on your part for you to be nourished, if that's what your desire is. Nothing can stop it. Nothing chokes barley out.
If barley is represented as a people, these are the people who receive the awareness of who they are as part of Elohim, as Elohim. Early on, barley has been found in Egypt. It's over 5,000 years old as a cereal. Over 5,000 years ago in Egypt. So it was a very basic staple.
So if it can grow in very harsh conditions, it's been around for a very long time, might we not perceive it as kind of a weed? I mean, in terms of the way we think of weeds.
We might perceive it that way. Those of us who are ignorant to the fact that it can be useful for different things, like food, like making sour mash or whatever they call it.
Well, I'm saying that because generally, in terms of how we perceive things, when something can grow in harsh conditions, when something is just there, we take it for granted.
Exactly.
But I also see it as, even though it's taken for granted, it can still be used as a first fruit. No matter how harsh your life is, no matter how badly you perceive it to be, there's still a portion of you that you can offer
Mhm.
to the Creator.
Yes, right.
Because there is a hovering that takes place, like the shop. Passover. I was looking at it a moment ago. It does not only mean to pass over, but it also means to hover over.
Mm.
So the hovering is what makes sure that the life is life is available in terms of nourishment. And it goes back to Genesis, the hovering over the deep.
It's always there. So what you just said in a nutshell was it also can be representative of God's faithfulness. It was cheap to buy back then, and it was easy to harvest if you did it. Not when the fast winds came through, but you had to know when to harvest it. When the gentle winds came through, shh, and it just separated. You see that? Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right. So that's when they went back. They were doing. It was during this time, barley harvest. So that was significant. It was significant because it was that time that represented the Passover. Okay, you're going to have this foreigner who comes in and is caught up with and celebrates the Passover of deliverance from bondage of Egypt. All right. She's already said, your God is going to be my God. Your people are going to be my people. She's already made that pronouncement. And so now, she's getting ready to enjoy that. All right, wheat. So what Boaz says was, I don't want you to go into anybody else's field. In other words, he was saying, if field and land represents consciousness, I want you within under my covering. I want you to hear I want you to see and hear the words that I do. You see what I'm saying? The words that I do. Not just what I say, but the words that I do, the way that I live. Don't go to another field. I mean, you can be accosted by strangers, by stuff that you don't understand there, but if you stay right here, the confines of my fields, my consciousness, my covering of sins, you'll be protected and you'll be safe. And he says, not only that, you know, he just kept increasing her status. She was with the gleaners, that's behind everybody. And then he invited her to sit at lunch, and that's when the reapers are sitting and eating too. The reapers were a step up. So Ruth, because of her courage, her faithfulness, her dedication, her love, that was being honored. So Boaz says then, I don't even want you, you know what? I don't want you just to stay around for the gleaning of the barley. I want you to stay in my fields for the harvest of the wheat also. And so, in other words, some people just got to glean during the gleaning of that one harvest. He invited her to remain. Remain, okay? Where did we stop? I got off a little bit. Pastor, you got anything to say yet? Wheat, then, is representative of the harvest of Pentecost, the giving of the law at Mount Sinai, when God spoke to the people. So that's the next harvest.
Say that again, Barbara, please.
The Feast of Pentecost, or a harvest, the Feast of Pentecost or harvest, is what wheat represents. And that's when God gave the law to Moses. Well, no, he actually spoke to you. Remember, he spoke to the people at Mount Sinai also. They heard him. They heard him. He came down from the mountain, spoke to the people. So that's sort of what wheat represents. Let me tell you a little bit about wheat. Wheat has to be crushed. Wheat has to be ground. Wheat has to, you have to go through a lot of machinations to get to the quote-unquote meal, the food, that thing that can be used. And there are people like that. We have to have so many experiences in life. Not just, you know, we're not barleys. A lot of us, and most of us are not barley. Most of us are wheat. We have to be ground. The experiences of what does this for us. The things that we experience in life. And as long as we don't say things like, so-and-so made me do it, or she or he did this to me, but accept and assume our responsibility in that experience, okay, it happened. What am I to learn from this? What's the lesson in this for me? Then your grounding may not be as much as somebody else's. You know what I mean? It may be that the cow just goes around one time and you get grounded enough, you know, that you are useful. You're useful for nourishment. Somebody else, like Pastor, might have to go down 15 times, whatever. It doesn't matter. The outcome is the same, right? The outcome is the same.
Yeah.
To make the wheat useful for the people's nourishment. So that's a difference in the barley and the wheat. Reminds me of, there was one other festival, and I'm not gonna, it wasn't mentioned here, but it's the festival, the Feast of Tabernacles, or Ingathering. And this commemorated the building of the tabernacles in the wilderness, and the time when Israel was supposed to cross the Jordan into the Promised Land. And the grapes are the harvest at this time of year when this happens. And you know what happens with grapes. They have to be mature, they are plucked, they're put in the vat, and then they are crushed. They have to be crushed in order for the juice to be, you could take one or two like this, but if you want wine, if you want the immediacy of the source of the fruit of that grape, it has to be crushed, and crushed well and mashed in that vat. Some of us are like the grapes, which is a little bit more than took a little bit more crushing than the wheat, a little bit more grounding than the wheat.
Does grapes represent wisdom?
They can, yes.
Okay.
But the outcome's a lot sweeter.
But we don't know that. If we know that, we're not willing to go through what it takes to get to that
I was
outcome
gonna say,
sometimes.
when you're going through it, you don't think about the sweetness on the other end.
But that's the festival of celebration and joy. Even though it's crushing.
But
It
look
still
at
doesn't feel good when you're going through.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I hear you, but I'm just saying too.
But look at what comes on the other side when you drink a little wine.
Feel good about it.
This, you know.
You don't care.
You forget about gosh, all those bad things that happen. What in other words, all three of these things, these types of nourishment, represent a feast to the Jewish people. And these feasts were not for them only; they were for us today as well. Not that we should do them, but so that we can understand the implication in our lives of what they do. Luke 3:12 is where we left off. Yep. Any questions about Ruth 3:12? This is when Boaz is saying, this is when in him is strength, says to her, oh, I didn't
Hey, sugar pie, come on in.
Came in and this shelter. What else is gonna behave? Be
Time travel.
expected.
You just dropped in from
I
New
just
York?
be expected. All right.
You can keep smiling.
Spring break.
Great. Here's where Boaz says this thing to Ruth. It's almost like he's blessing her. Remember we talked about her faithfulness, all that. He'd heard about all of that. And the issue is, it's not what she said, it's what she did. During this time when she cared for her mother-in-law, it wasn't what she said, it's what she did. Because Ruth didn't go around saying, I came all this way with my mother-in-law because I know I needed to protect her and keep her. She didn't advertise that. She just worked. There's a lesson in that also. You don't have to tell everybody what it is you're going to do or what it is you have done. Just be. Just do. Just live. One of the books in the New Testament talks about living epistles read, something unread among men. That just be the word. Just be Elohim, that you are. Anything else on 13, 14? We might get to the 4th chapter today. I already talked about this, so it shouldn't be a lot of questions. I'm trying to. This is when in him is strength, Boaz told her, come hither, come my daughter, come and eat the bread and dip your stuff in the vinegar right here. And he gave her some parched corn. Okay, step up. All before it was the raw corn that she took home. But not only, and you remember, Ruth used to just glean from morning to evening, only took a break, a small break, while everybody else is still breaking, Ruth was working. And now she gets to sit at the table and eat what the owner of the field ate and gave to the reapers. Not only did he do that, but she had enough to take back to her mother-in-law.
You know what's sweet though?
What's sweet?
In him is strength. That really is sticking with me. In him is strength.
This is one of those books, like Esther. There are 2 books in the Bible written, named for women that we know of.
Mm-hmm.
There's Sister Mary Magdalene, all of those, but in the current Bible, okay, in the current version of it, Ruth and Esther, and in neither one of those does it talk about God. It talks about what the names represent, but it doesn't talk about God. And there's a lesson in that. I mean, it's not the issue of people needing to know that you serve whoever you serve. They're going to see it in your actions. The Israelites, the Jews back here, lived the word in a sense. It was who they were. They and the word were not separate kinds of things. The word was them and they were the word. So it wasn't like you could take the book and say, oh, you know what, I didn't do this at lunchtime and I was supposed to. No, it wasn't that kind of thing. It's that Aramaic understanding that I'm not separated from my external. My internal me is a part of the external that out there. It's all one and the same. We Westerners separated out mind, body, spirit, soul. Aramaic people don't, the Aramaics, even in Jesus' time, and Jesus spoke Aramaic primarily, they didn't separate it out like that. They didn't see division like that. It all just flowed. It was all one part of the psyche.
Say something. So is that why John says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God? Am I saying that right?
Yes. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It was all the same.
Yeah.
We're the ones who separated it out later.
But when he said that, he was not talking about Yahweh. He said it was Elohim, Gedoshi Elohim. In the beginning was Elohim. And when he said word, actually the Hebrew or the Aramaic for word denotes a continuous sentence. Something that's continuously spoken.
Okay.
And it's almost, it gives the connotation of something that's spoken over and over again, but yet spoken in different, presented in different ways. So it's all about, when it says that, that's what it's talking about.
Okay. And isn't that what the Bible does for us, for those parts that we do have access to? It speaks to us over and over. All of the Bible is the story of us. It's the story of us. And all of these are characteristics, are attributes that are in us and are us. So, and each one of them, the stories may be different, and people who look at it superficially, just the outside part, just see stories. But if you start digging deeper, each one reveals something about what's in us. Which ought to also point to the fact that we are Elohim, if we've got all that stuff in us. It's just covered by layers and layers of doubt, unawareness, whatever, shame, fear, whatever. We haven't separated out from us yet. 17. Well, I don't know if I want to have to go through all these. Let's see, is there a question about 17 or 18? We'll do it a little differently.
What does it say?
Okay. She gleaned in the field until evening and beat out that she had gleaned. It was about an ephah of barley. An ephah was about, it's a measure of grain. It's about, it says 10 omers. What's an omer?
Which are
9 gallons. What?
My Bible says these 6 measures of barley he gave to me. What is this? What does 6 mean?
through 17.
In 17?
I'm sorry, what's 6 mean in 17?
Yeah, it says 6 measures of barley.
6 is the number for man. The manifestation of the weakness of man, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, so what does that mean when you put the weakness of man with barley?
Well, you know what? Ruth is still not married yet. You haven't had that. It can be reflective of her still being, having the opportunity for weakness within her, because she's still on her own. Even though Boaz is looking out for her, he's not her husband at this point. She's not. It's like us. We're wandering around, and we have finally made that decision. You know what? Lord, for you I live, for you I die, period. The end. I mean, we haven't gotten to that point yet. Ruth is getting there. She's already said, well, she hadn't made that proclamation because she hadn't slept at his feet yet, you see. So it's the potential weakness of man. It's also manifestation of sin. That's another way to look at it. There's that potential to manifest sin. And what else does 6 mean? You know, Sheldon?
Well, I was looking at the connection with 6. It's just foreshadowing to Ruth 3:18.
Well, let's hurry up and get there. Any other questions, Audrey, about 17? All right, 3:18. So she carried it back, all that she gleaned, took it to her mother-in-law, and her mom-in-law said how much grain she had, and then Ruth gave her the roasted grain. I mean, she brought roasted grain from the work field. Roasted grain from the work field. Didn't have to cook it. It was already done.
Boy.
The implication is how when you have favor, things just heap upon you. There's a passage in the Bible that talks about the wealth of the wicked are laid up for the just. Now Boaz is a man of integrity, so he doesn't go into that wicked. But it just implies that when you stay focused and you know who you are, that there's a shifting of that to be a blessing to those who are God's So anything else, Sheldon? You were saying it was a foreshadow of 18.
Well, I was wondering if it was foreshadowing, because there was not completion. How mine said is, then she said, wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out. For the man would not rest until he has settled it today. So,
You passed 18, Sheldon?
you know,
No, that's it.
What?
that's 18.
Oh, you know what? I'm in Ruth 2.
Yeah, he has passed you.
Okay, so just wait him out.
Mm-hmm.
So where you want us to be?
I don't want you to be in where Sheldon is.
Ruth 2.
I want 3. I don't want to go. Ooh, that's the second to last verse in that chapter. That's what I want to be.
But you in 18 now? 3:18?
I am.
Okay. Wait, until you know how this matter turns out. With the 6, with the carbon and being closer to man, the situation is not finished process, and so the finishing process of becoming, so to speak.
Okay. It's a process in the works. It just hasn't been completed yet.
So,
Interesting.
that's 6. If it's 4, it could be 4 plus 2, which is man. 4 is man world, and 2 is bringing in the enmity of man with God.
Hmm.
So it's a process of recognizing where you are and bringing and desiring, as opposed to move beyond that.
Even when you look directly at 6, shesh is often occurring, what it represents.
So what is it, Pastor, what's the Hebrew when Isha has not yet united with
Ish.
there's a letter that's missing,
Oh, the hay is missing fire.
and so that's sort of what you're talking about. It's not until that she is still very much representative of the weakness of man until you have that infusion of the hay, the spirit, the word, the letter,
The passion.
the essence of who the Creator is part of you.
I think that one of the key to it is fighting not to think about it in material terms. Because what I'm recognizing in Ruth is that every reference is spiritual. You know how man is spoken of in material terms, in the Greek it would be anthropos. But it's not speaking of man in terms of him having flesh. It's talking about the spiritual, the spiritual masculine energy. Because it says Ish and Isha. And Ish and Isha were in Genesis where he said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cling to his Isha. So it is in that it's telling us that everything in this particular book is making reference to something spiritual. But if you look at it from the perspective of barley and wheat and not get the
Right.
deeper understanding, then you've lost the whole meaning, not only of this, but of your life.
You've got to go deeper than the superficial, what it says. But that's the same for every one of these. We're finding, right, that there's more underneath the covering of the word when we look for it. It's like that treasure you dig for it.
Mm-hmm.
Seek and you shall find it. Chapter 4. Yes, I guess we're not at chapter 4 yet.
Well, I think it's interesting though that 6 represents man and all his idiosyncrasies, whatever.
Well, his attributes as a man.
But 7 represents completeness.
Mhm.
look how close.
It,
It's like,
but look at it.
it's like, if you just recognize and accept
Mhm,
yourself as Elohim,
mhm.
there's completeness.
It just opens so much more up to you than the limitations of manness or womanness.
It's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
But the thing I'm thinking about though is the closeness of the two,
Mhm,
the 6 and the 7. I
Well,
mean, it's just one step away.
mhm.
And
It's world, that one step.
But
is
yeah.
worlds, you know.
but think
a
about it.
universe apart.
One is your unicity.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cannot be divided, cannot be separated. But if it's 7 in completeness, right? If you take unicity away, it's 6.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's always the numerical value always fits what man is shortcoming. One step short of being spiritual, just one step. Like there is only one step between us and death. That's the death. The taking away of the lack of recognition of Elohim, which leaves us in the state that we're in with trying to develop our spirituality through intellect, as opposed to looking at the scriptures for what they are without without trying to make it logical.
Without trying to bend it to your will.
Right.
Mm. Hmm. Hmm. Chapter 4,
You sure?
1. I'm going to read it so we can make sure we get into it. Then went Boaz up to the gate and sat him down there. And behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, unto whom he said, Hold such a one, turn aside, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. As background to this, just remember that Boaz, after Ruth lay at his feet, and he kept her there all night long because he didn't want to send her in the middle of the night and expose her to potential harm. He was a man. In him, his strength is a man of integrity. He cared not only about her safety, but about her reputation. He cared about Ruth in several different arenas, several different perspectives, and not just as the woman, oh, what I can get from this woman kind of thing. No, didn't even enter his mind.
When he said stay through the night,
Mm-hmm.
the word night in the Hebrew talks about twisting the light away. So he did not want her, the light, to be taken away from her. In other words, what he's talking about is if you leave too soon, then the light can more easily be twisted away from you.
So he didn't want anything to have an opportunity even
Right. to
do that. And even then, Boaz says, but you know what? I got to tell you, there's another one of our relatives who is a member of the family of my God is King, because that's what of the family of my God is King. There's another man who's a closer relationship than I am, and truthfully, that man has the right to redeem you before I do it. So all the way, he was a man of integrity. He could have easily just gone on and done his thing. He did not. Yeah.
In the beginning of that verse was the gate or something?
Yeah.
Read it again if you don't mind.
Then went Boaz up to the gate. The gate is that place, the meeting place. Lots of cities, in the biblical times, they would talk about so and so at the gate. It has a physical meaning where people gather, people pass. You could sit. It's like sitting in a rural town and sitting on Main Street, and you got your checkers board set up right there, and one guy's here, and you can see everything that happens on Main Street in a sense. Same kind of connotation in the physical. In the spiritual, gate is an opening, an avenue to something different.
That's what I was looking
spiritually.
for. Okay.
Yes. So Boaz went up to the gate. Yeah,
Who is this person? They don't say, but
they didn't
what
say.
does he represent?
They did not say. He represented a person who had the opportunity to be the one through whom the Messiah came through his lineage. But he thought more of himself. He was more selfish, thinking about, well, you know what, if I,
Okay.
well, we hadn't gotten there yet, but anyway.
The man who was not named
Yeah,
can be anyone. Anyone who represents redemption.
So
you represented the possibility of redemption
Right,
because
okay.
you got to act on it
Yeah.
to redeem.
So he's every man,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
meaning we all have the possibility of being the redeemer
For
for
someone.
someone.
It was almost like Boaz showing the way
Mhm.
because he stopped at the opening. He didn't go through it. He didn't pass. He had the opportunity to, but he stopped at the gate. The gate I know.
And what do you know? The kinsman that Boaz was talking about came
At the
back.
gate,
What?
Oh, come on, at the gate, I know.
Why does it somebody's knocking at the gate? I know. That's right. And so he said, "Hey, come. Let's talk a minute. Turn aside. Sit down here." So the man did. And Boaz chose. Look at what happens. Look how he sets this up. Somebody's looking up what 10 means, right? Responsibility, law, whatever.
Conjunction. It means
Go ahead.
like-
10. He chose 10. Wait a minute, y'all. Let me just say what he chose. 10 villagers.
No, 10 elders.
10. I'm sorry.
10 men of the elders.
10 men of the 10 of the village leaders,
Yes.
and they represented.
Conjunction. So with
What's conjunction?
Conjunction deals with like all the 10 fingers together.
Mhm.
That's what the meaning of this particular 10 deals with.
Mm-hmm.
So to work along with. So I'm thinking they chose the number 10 to try to say that all of them were in accordance with one another, of the same mind, etc.
Like a testimony, or like they're the elders, and whatever action occurs.
Then they're definitely in an agreement.
That's right.
This man is not Ish. It's Enosh, which is a mortal man.
Okay, so that's every
So the
man who
elders are
doesn't
mortal
have.
man that he's talking about. But all the other times is Ish.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
It's almost like setting up a physical. You got to have a physical witness to this, as well as the spiritual, which has already taken place. Whatever has happened in the spiritual has already taken place. But the issue is, these are the people who are going to be the ones who accept Ruth, a Moabitess, married to this Jewish man. And so there is nothing they can go back and say and talk about once this transaction has occurred. You'll find that it wasn't just the leaders; it was other villagers who were here too. So let's just yes.
So, everything, regardless of what happens in the spiritual, if mortal man does not accept it, it never manifests.
For him, no.
Yeah. Well, I'm not just talking about for him, because what we do has an effect on mankind.
Well, that in that sense,
Yeah.
yes.
So, if, for example, everything that Jesus represented was already spiritual, but if he had chosen not to recognize what the spiritual is and what he was capable of, and that he is indeed Elohim, then none of the things that he did would have taken place. But that would have had an adverse effect or in effect on mankind, period. So I think my point is that, I'm trying to make, is that you can know all the spiritual stuff you want, but if it's not physically verbalized or physically acted upon, it does not become real for you or the people who cross your path, because if they're looking at you for direction. Does that make sense?
So if you don't open that gate and go through it, then nothing's going to happen for those in your phone. Yeah, you can see that the gate of the door all day long, but if you don't walk through it, what you will see is what's still on this side of the gate.
Yeah.
So do you have to verbalize it among mortals?
No, I say all. Verbalized or experienced. It has to be acted out in some way. It has to be, because think it, we create with our tongue, with words.
Abracadabra.
Yeah,
I create as I speak.
Yeah, right. So verbalization is necessary. However, if there is spiritual verbalization, but there is physical action in response to the spiritual verbalization, then it's the same effect.
You need something to happen in your life, and you know that in the spiritual, it's already happened. Because you've settled it in you, and you don't doubt anymore. You don't have to go around saying it. You just act like it's already happened. That's how you know it begins to manifest as a physical, because you don't have to tell anybody. You just act upon what it is you know, as if it's a done deal, because it is a done deal. But you don't have to say that every time to everybody. I don't know if that resonates or not.
Well, Abraham, you people walk around saying that, what is it? Even though I don't see it, where Abraham said, I can't remember the exact phrase that he used. When he speak it, it comes into being. And people are teaching that you can speak things into being. But Abraham could do that.
Call those things as though they.
Yeah,
Also, they be not as though they were.
Yeah, that's what Abraham said. But the reason Abraham could do that is because he had already heard from the Creator. He had already spoken to him and told him what was going to be, so that what had not yet manifested, he could call it as though it had. That's the difference there. So if you have not heard it from the Creator, it doesn't matter how many times you talk about it, it's not going to happen. The craziest thing to me was, and believe you me, I participated in a lot of craziness.
That's why you had that.
Those ticks.
Yeah. That's why you have to, I mean, the idea of you naming and claiming it is ridiculous. Because
Blessed and highly favored.
yeah, why would the Creator tell you to name and claim something that belongs to me? You know, or you want something. It's been used to convince people that the highest form of blessing or a blessing is consists of physical stuff. Yeah, material. When in actuality, there are no such thing as material blessings.
Material gains, so
No.
to speak,
Yeah, none whatsoever. All of it's spiritual.
It also perpetuates that whole us is them separation. Because if you have a right to someone else's things, you're better than them.
And that
Yeah.
goes back to selfishness.
Okay, so Boaz begins to tell the fellow, he stopped there and they began to talk. And he said, Naomi came out of Moab, sells a piece of land, which was Elimelech's. God is my king. And I'm legally informing you. Here's your opportunity to get it. Sitting here in front of all these witnesses. What he actually said was, but that's not what he actually said. But, so I'm legally informing you. Acquire it before those sitting here and before the leaders of my people. If you want to exercise your right to redeem it, then do it. Here's your opportunity. You're the next of kin. This is your opportunity to redeem this land. And you have the first right because you're the closest kin. So do it. You have the first option. Redeem it. I'm next in line. And so the man said, yeah, I'm gonna get that land. Pastor, you want to say something?
Yeah, again, it's talking about consciousness. And to sell talks about to surrender. So it's talking about act and surrender your awareness for what purpose? Is it for the purpose of redemption? The thing that you're aware of is not real to you? Or is not real at all?
And if God is my king, is the one who you're in that family, you have the right to redeem that consciousness. You know, this man who had no name could have had something spiritually had he redeemed that land of God is my king, who's Elimelech. And so he said, yeah, I want it. It's like us. We want it, we want it, we want it. Well, okay, let's leave the second part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Second part is this. When you acquire the field from Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the wife of our deceased relative, in order to preserve the family name by raising up descendants, a descendant who will inherit his property. In other words, there's something else that comes with this consciousness. If God is your king as well, there's something else that comes with it. You have to acquire Ruth. Now she is that fellow with the M, beginning of the M. What's his name? Naomi's son, the one with the M. Whatever. She's his wife, and he's dead. So the kinsman redeemed under the Levirate law. The the closest kin has to marry that widow and have a child, so that family name does not disappear. Okay.
Bobby, let me take that a step further.
Go.
If in that culture, if the brother died and the brother living did not marry her, then that meant that the brother who died name was wiped away as he never existed before, and no one in the family could ever talk about him again because it's as though he never existed. That's why that was the other side of that marrying the next of kin.
Well, remember who Naomi is. Now, Naomi is pleasantness or sweetness of God, or if she represents the Shekinah, God who dwells here in the physical. This man obviously did not know all of that. He didn't know what he was missing. As many of us, before we became to an awareness, didn't know what we were missing. We had access to a spiritual account that we never withdrew from, because we had a key that we never went to the safe deposit box to open up to see what was in it. We just don't know what we have access to. Y'all do now, right?
Yes, we're learning.
But we are on that journey.
Barbara, I have a question.
Okay.
Properties.
Yeah.
What does that mean spiritually?
Property is the same as land, consciousness. But it's something that goes down through. You know the other thing about that? If property goes from down through physically through the family, it's almost saying that this level of this consciousness is something that that continues and is not crushed out or dies or cut off. This consciousness of who you are and who the Creator is continues in your descendants. Sheldon.
This might help a little.
Sure.
As far as property and ownership is concerned, in 4 and 4, when it says buy has to do with to erect or to set upright. So it's not looking at it as someone taking ownership when you say buy or anything about purchasing, acquiring, etc.
Also mean create.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And field talks is different than land, in that land can just lay there, but field is cultivated,
Mm-hmm.
which means that somebody has attended to the awareness.
Yes.
It's something you pay attention to.
So how you tie that in together?
So buy it.
Well,
That's him. He won't put it up.
Somebody. How do you tie that in together?
It's no ownership that's being shifted from one to the other here. It's just an elevation of conscience as far as if you could think about it, maybe an intention being given to something, etc. So in a way, you're lending your consciousness or your thoughts to that particular thing.
So then is it like taking on responsibility to make sure that consciousness continues?
Yes, because everything that Boaz is talking about, I mean, if you think about it in the terms, if you read in between the lines, not even looking at it from a spiritual standpoint, everything is about something that he has to do. It's not like he's gaining some great plush mansion or something like that. It's definitely he's gaining a whole bunch of responsibility. It's like, I don't want to call it work, but there is action on his part.
It's like they're preserving God's.
it's like consciousness has laid dormant, like, religious consciousness. I guess an example of that is where I came from in terms of church. They're doing the same thing that they were doing when I was a little boy.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing the same thing when I was a little boy before I was born.
Yeah.
That's land, that's consciousness lying dormant, land
Okay.
being dormant. If it's a field, then there's cultivation taking place. So when cultivation takes place, the field is prepared for planting or for sowing. And from that grows nutrition, or food, or fruit. So the difference between that is we are making every attempt to cultivate this consciousness, and so that seed can be planted, so that and that is the word itself, and bring forth fruit.
Why you just couldn't do that in the beginning when I asked you to do it?
I want to.
He's
That answer that.
He's being rebellious.
Well, let's overlay some words. Let's overlay some of these underlying meanings of words on top of this then and see how it speaks. Then, this is 5. Then, what's Boaz's name? In him is strength, said. When you acquire, when you buy, when you create, when you set up, when you procure this, the field, when you have access to this consciousness, okay? I'm in 5. Of the hand of Naomi, and hand has to do with power, strength, and again, Naomi has to do with delight, pleasant, sweetness of God. It says when you get it from Naomi, Ruth comes with it. He's saying when you have this awareness of who you are, and you have the power, and you have this consciousness, you can't just cut off Ruth, this friend. You can't just cut off. It's like right here, Boaz is establishing, in a sense, the fact that it's no longer just confined to you as a Jew, but you bring in then that foreigner who used to be a foreigner. He's saying, you must also buy it also of Ruth, the outsider, the wife of the one who's dead, so that you can raise up the name, so that you can, in other words, it's almost like a bridge here. You can't get one without the other. It's like you know how that thing in that it's ching ching. It's almost like if you do this, you are establishing something totally new. You are creating something totally new. You are giving people outside of the Jewish, of the Assembly of Israel, an opportunity to be part of that consciousness, to have access to that same Creator that years and thousands of years we've said you can't do.
But Barbara, he's laying it on thick for that man. Sound like he's even trying to frighten him because he himself wants that.
I'm not sure he's trying to frighten him. I'm not sure he's not trying to say all of this comes with the territory. All of this is part of the responsibility of the action that you take in redeeming this.
But all the time he knew that he wanted it. That's what he wanted, right?
Right, but he was a man of integrity. He did it. He went through it the right way. He would have liked Ruth. He felt good that Ruth came to him and didn't go after the young guys, etc., etc., etc. And he knew Ruth. He knew Ruth stood for what it was that he'd heard about her. She stood for integrity. She stood for courage, blah, 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 blah. And she would have been an absolutely great wife for him. But knowing all of that, he also knew that there was another one who was closer who had that right to redeem. And so he was simply saying to the man, okay, redeem this, but you got to also know that this comes with it. And so he didn't say that at first. He kind of led him. So in that sense, I would agree with you. He didn't say, okay, here's Ruth and then here's the land. He said, here's the land. And also, here's Ruth.
But you know.
Just so you know.
It also could be from an alternative perspective, though, that he wanted to make sure that everything was taken care of and accounted for as far as, like, these are all the things that you need to do. It's imperative that they be done with me passing on this responsibility to you. So, you know, if you're not going to do it, then, you know, basically it needs to be done. It's of utmost importance.
And here are the witnesses. So the man who said, yeah, I'm going to redeem it, backed up a little bit there.
Hold up, wait a minute.
Hold up, yeah. Yep. The guardian said, then I am unable to redeem it. The kinsman said that. That's another word, guardian. I can't redeem it for myself. Least I mar my own inheritance.
What does that mean?
Least I mar my own inheritance. It doesn't tell us if this individual has family, or children, or sons, or anything. But he's thinking about, if I accept her, and I have a child with her, then is this going to mix up with my stuff that I got and what I'm, you know, he started thinking selfishly. Is this going to mix in, and is this child that I will have with Ruth going to have access to my stuff? In other words, he was thinking it was purely physical.
So if he marries her and has a child, is it the child of the kinsman that died? Is that how that works?
Yes,
It's not his child, really.
that's right. But you'll notice that they never make note, in the rest of the story, they never make note of Elimelech's son. It's always Boaz and Ruth when they talk about that son, that child. Pastor?
Yeah, he says, I will redeem it. But then when he says, I cannot, it also could be, I don't have the power to redeem it. Because that cannot talks about not having the power, or I don't have the right to redeem it. And it's almost as if when he found out what comes with it,
That he understood.
now he reverts to what he should have been doing in the first place. In the first place, this is what he should have said in the beginning, I don't have the right to do this. But when he found out that he had taken on this other responsibility, that's when he spoke the truth about what was really going on in his life.
Why wouldn't he have thought though that initially he didn't have the right to do it, or the power to do it?
Well, initially, he didn't know that what was coming with the land.
Yeah, it sounded like he wanted this, he was just being greedy,
Yeah.
so to speak. And then after he was told what all that comes with it, like, this has to be done, this has to be done, oh no, I'm unable to do all of that.
It's like someone who says, I want to understand the spiritual, the esoteric. I want to understand that, and I want to be able to do all of this stuff, whatever the stuff is. But then when they find out what you have to go through
Yeah.
in order to get to that place, all of a sudden, it's not worth it.
Mm.
Yeah, it's like, I can't do that.
Okay.
Well, I'm not willing to have my world turned upside down, so no, never mind.
And that's a key understanding of the difference between what was in the land of the Moabites, and in the land of those who believed and Jehovah. The difference was, it's easy to serve an idol because there's no responsibility attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no need for change. But when you start talking about submitting to the one who created you,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden it comes with self-responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
you're
right.
accountable.
Right, a pastor's not responsible for you, he's responsible to you. And when you come to that, you don't have anybody to blame. That's why you don't want it. When you mess up, it's like, the devil did that. No, you the devil that did it. so it's in that sense. That's why I said it anyway.
If Boaz's name is in him is strain, another meaning for cannot is have the ability to have the strength. I don't have the strength.
Yeah.
So he's saying, okay, I don't have the strength. Now in him is strength, saying you have this opportunity. You have this opportunity to redeem this. But this kinsman said, I don't have the strength. I don't have the power. I don't have the right. So in him is strength is next in line. And so, any other questions about that one? 7. This is the manner. It talks about what happens in Israel regarding a transaction. This used to be, it says, the way to finalize a transaction involving redemption in Israel. A man would remove his sandal and give it to the other party. This was a legally binding act in Israel. And so the guardian said to Boaz, you may acquire. And the man removed his sandal. And then Boaz said to the people, you are witnesses today that I have acquired from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, Kilion, and Malon. Okay? And those who saw Leah saw actually the man, the sandal. The sandal was representative of, okay, this is a contract.
Mm.
Done deal.
Handshake.
Huh? Yeah,
Handshake.
sandal shake. And in some cultures they refer to that man as the man with the loosened sandal. Which sort of like is a label in a sense, because it says you had an opportunity to do something and you chose not to.
Wow.
So this is the proof that you didn't do it, but this is the proof that somebody else did, in a sense.
So is he shoeless for the rest of the day? I realize this is a silly question.
Well, he pulled
But,
off
like,
the
does everybody
sandal.
know
I
he
guess
went-
he pulled off the other one and just went barefoot till he went back to his house.
Okay.
He got to keep part of himself.
Yeah.
Well, it
This
could
is
have also
interesting.
just been the act of me giving you the sandal and that symbolized something, and then you give me my sandal back.
I don't think he gave him something back.
I think he limped home.
He had to find a new man.
That sandal was representative.
Mm.
But 9 says, I have acquired, I have bought. That's what bought means. I have erected, created. I possess. All that Naomi had and God is my king had. And that was Chilions and Malons by the hand of Naomi. Ah, let's look at that. He said that it looks like you're not free from trouble even after you do that. Because it says, not only have I acquired everything that was Elimelech's, whose name means God is my king, I've acquired everything that was Chilion's too. Kilion is the way you pronounce it. Pining, sickly. He's acquired that too. And he's acquired everything that was Machlon's, sickness. In other words, then, all of these attributes he acquired too. It doesn't necessarily mean he has to act on it, but all that came as part of the package. Okay?
So these are things that belonged to sickness and disease. Is that right? That he's recovered, or?
It belonged to God is my king, and then as the next in line, sickness or pining or whatever you call them, had access to it.
I see.
And so now he's bought it, so he has access to it all. That's interesting. I'm sure we haven't really
Well,
explored
it's a
that
story
one.
of restoration, isn't it? I mean, first it belongs to, or I say it, but I guess this consciousness or this understanding, right? Whatever it is, this area of consciousness has belonged to something king, what?
God is my king.
God is my king. And then next in line is like sickness and destruction and wasting away.
Mhm.
And then it's recovered by Boaz or redeemed.
In him is strength.
In him is strength.
But he gets everything. He gets Elimelech's part of it. He gets Kilion's part of it, and he gets Machlon's part of it.
It's like a trail or a record of who has possessed or had access to this understanding.
It is. It's like a title search, if you will.
Yeah.
But you got to understand that you don't have to act on, just because you have access, act on everything that you got. That's
It's like the Lord is my shepherd, therefore I have no lack.
Mhm.
You don't have a lack of what you need to survive, and that also includes sickness, diseases, brokenheartedness, the whole 9 yards. No one seeks to become who they were created to be because they're so good or because everything happens to them that they want to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
There are disappointments and things that bring pain emotionally or physically that kind of sort of wakes us up.
But he was willing to take on this responsibility.
Well, could you say it a little different way, that I'm almost thinking of the marriage vows, sickness and health, the whole thing. I mean, that expression we use, the whole 9 yards. The only way for anything to be transformed is to be absorbed, taken in full. You can't say, no, I don't want that, because there's baggage that goes with that. I'm just going to take this.
Right.
But in the case of marriage, etc., obviously you enter into these things before you're fully aware of what all that means. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
You're
that's
right.
You're right. That's the same thing with the scripture.
Well, so the question is, what do you do the day after? It's not, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of go, yeah, me too, and then it's, we'll see.
Yeah. I remember when I embarked on the journey. You remember me talking about the 3 things that were offered?
Yeah.
Had I known the things that I had to deal with, the things I had to endure, I'm not sure
Yeah.
that I would have said, okay, Lord, whatever you want. I'm not sure I would have done that. I probably would have stayed tradition and just had a good time.
So he resist.
Well, but even if you had enough,
Gotcha.
I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
even if you had enough, whatever word you want to use, strength, courage, intuition, sense of rightness,
Fortitude. Stand.
without knowing everything, you could have a sense, no, all of this has to be absorbed for it to be for the transition, for the power to be taken out of it, for the distraction to be got rid of. Like I'm saying, you can't just take the bits and pieces that are pretty nice, comfortable, sweet, etc.
And it was not curiosity, I mean, it was not power, courage, it was curiosity.
Yeah.
I was just nosy. I wanted to see what it was.
But those other inheritances are still out there if you don't
It's all in how you
take
do
and
it.
transform them all. So they're still there in the ether, in the spirit world, whatever, to be.
But that's
Yeah,
like what's in
whatever.
us even now. The good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, it's what we choose to meditate on, and act on, and manifest. Vermette, did you have something?
I was just listening, it just kind of hit me that if Boaz is in his name, what it means, so that in spite of all those things that he accepted or was kind of aware of, kind of not aware of, no matter what it is, there's strength in us to absorb that, to get past that, to get through that.
And remember, this is an archetype of the of Christ the Redeemer, who took on what, quote unquote, what the New Testament says, the sins of the world, meaning everything you can think of. So Boaz was sort of a pre-shadowing of that same kind of notion of taking on everything. I got God as my king, but I got everything that came with it too, like his boys and the attributes there. So. All right, let's go to 10. So he's saying to everybody, you all are my witnesses, in 9, that I got all of this. I've taken on, I assume the responsibility. I'm responsible for all of this now. And including Ruth, the Moabitess, the wife of Machlon. I've purchased to be my wife, to raise up the dead, the name of the dead, the name of the dead upon his inheritance. You are all my witnesses. That's what he's saying today. But 11 says, is where I got the notion it wasn't just the elders who were there. 11 talked about all the people who were at the gate, and the elders replied, we are witnesses. And then they proceed to bless her by saying, may the Lord make the woman who is entering your home like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built up the house of Israel. May you prosper in Ephrathah, that's a town, and become famous in Bethlehem. So look at that proclamation that was made. They don't know what they're saying. But out of this lineage comes the Messiah, Christ.
Did I miss something?
What?
Who was she about to marry?
In him the strength.
Well, who was this other person? I must have left out when
He's
y'all
a
was
kinsman. He's just another person who had the opportunity and the right to marry her first if he chose to.
talking. Okay.
Oh, well, he gave it up.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
He says he didn't have the power or the will or the desire after he
We'll back
knew.
up just for you.
No, that's a lot. I'll catch you.
Thank you. Verse 12. Remember I told you about Perez and how Tamar sat at the side of the road? Yeah.
These are, this is a pronunciation of a man and wife thing when he makes that, when the elders make that
And they're the
proclamation.
witnesses around.
Yeah, because what I noticed is that I've not yet found the word in the Hebrew for wife. Neither have I found that in Aramaic. It's always woman, the one with the womb. But and what we have done, when we say, oh yeah, that's my woman, it can be so demeaning based on the tone in which it's used. So have we taken something that's supposed to be a divine reference for the feminine and demeaned it, or made it something almost vocal? Because I've not found that word for wife. Anyway,
Have you found husband?
I haven't looked for that one.
Well, it's the feminine of 0376, and 0376 is contracted from 0582, which is from 0605, which is a primitive root to be frail, feeble, or melancholy, desperate, incurable, sick, woeful.
And what's that
What
for?
word is that for?
I gotta go back now to what
Well,
I
that's
originally
five,
read. I looked up the word wife
1224
in 10.
If you go back to that,
I looked up the word wife.
I mean, if you follow it all the way down, it goes back to man. To
Okay.
mortal man.
But it says, but the root of this wife is Isha.
Isha,
Hmm.
that's it.
So yeah, it is a spiritual kind of thing that has
Yeah.
happened here.
That's what I'm talking about. We speak as a wife as being this woman on my own.
Mm-hmm.
But what he's talking about is taking the responsibility or becoming aware and accepting the Shekinah, the feminine attributes. It's a spiritual thing. It's not, you look good, I want to marry you type thing. That's not it at all. It's for a reason. And think about what he said. If by virtue of him doing this, the dead was raised.
Yeah.
The light of the dead, the name of the dead was raised. So the light of that which was dead in you is resurrected. When you become one with the attributes that when you become aware rather and accept the attributes that you were not previously aware of, that were placed in you by the Creator.
Mm.
It's almost like a marriage, for lack of a better term, has to take place internally before it can possibly be real externally. If I'm not married to me, I can't be married to you.
Well, the two aspects of your whole being, if it's feminine and masculine,
Right.
then that's what it is. But like most things in life, like my mother used to tell me, you have to make all the most important decisions in life before you're ready.
Yeah.
Right? So you step into things without full understanding. The question is whether you stay open and receiving to learn from that. So, yeah, we don't. Unfortunately, we don't inherit that wholeness to then
Right.
step into life with. We have to learn it through the experience. So the last gasp as you're dying, maybe, I get it. That's what you hope.
Let's hope you get it before it's the last
I'm making a joke.
game. I understand. We got it though. We got it. I
But
get it.
if you think of Buddhism and all the other things, what is it even in Catholicism? The most important instant of your life's experience is the moment of your death.
That's it.
Okay.
Why are you given absolution? Everything comes down to that 1 second. All those energies that go through your chakra. If you stay the course at that instant, you get through.
Okay.
Man, I gotta wait till then.
But
Well, I mean, you can fool around and, you get some time, you know what I mean?
that was
Assuming you don't know that bus is
that was the whole thing behind
out there waiting
Constantine
for you.
wanting to be baptized just before he died.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing behind that. I want to do everything in the world I want to do. I'm going to conquer the world regardless of how brutal I have to be. But just before I die,
That's it.
I want to be baptized.
So that's it. So if you could predict the moment you would die,
Yeah.
just think of what you could do to about it.
Back to Ruth 12. Back to Ruth 4:12.
Sorry.
You remember when Tamar was sitting side of the road and she put on, she took off her mourner's garb and Judah thought she was a harlot because
Yeah.
Judah was supposed to give Tamar his youngest son so that he could do the same thing that Boaz did for Elimelech. He could raise up a son with Tamar, but Judah refused to do it. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Look what the people say. I mean, and from that point, people then really in Israel, Pharez and whatever his brother's name was, his twin brother's name, they were considered bastards in a sense, and not allowed in certain assemblies with the Israelites. For years and years and years and years. It was that prejudice, like the Moabites and the Ammonites through Lot's line. But look what the people say here. May your family become like the family of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the descendants the Lord gives you by this young woman. That is prophetic, and they may or may not know how prophetic it was. Because it is through the union of Judah and his daughter-in-law that the Messiah comes, through that lineage. And what I'm saying is then the story of Ruth just reminds me that anybody has access now. It doesn't matter who you are, who your parents were. Anyone has access because the divine, the spark of the divine is in each one of us, all of us. And so we have access to the same creator. We are part of the creator.
I wonder why didn't they mention Zara, the twin?
Because the other twin?
Yeah.
Because it's through this one that the next person is in this very direct lineage
Okay.
to the Messiah. It's like with Isaac and Ishmael.
Yeah.
They don't usually mention Ishmael. They mention Isaac and all of his descendants.
Right.
But Barbara, doesn't it make you, I mean, if you turn that a little bit, the sense I get from that is, at that juncture, if you think of history as being a journey and things are evolving, right? More toward wholeness or whatever, the release of that. What have we done in the Roman Catholic Church and really in the Christian Church? We've taken the truth that Jesus said is available to everyone and put it through him.
Oh, but it's not available to Muslims.
Well,
And it's not available to, that's what we've done.
But even then, okay, so there are other tribes that aren't even part of the celebration. But even as in this instance, the sense I get is they're saying for you in this situation with Ruth, all of this, what word we want to use, blessing or whatever, right? But now you have in the person of Jesus saying, but it's not through me, it's through this awareness that it's for everyone. But then you have the church recoiling from that as the church becomes an institution and saying, no, it's through him. What are all the signs on the side of the road?
They're
right?
forgetting that
It
him
needs
is
to
the
come-
word. That's what
Right,
yeah.
that's what him is.
So they're going back.
Jesus is the word.
It's like they're going back to almost this period, this level of understanding where all that blessing is there and recognized to be there because of the goodness and blah, 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 this. But it's out of that thing. It's not suddenly universal. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
But
So
It's like they're trying to reconfine. We're trying to confine it again.
back in a box and,
Yes.
and trapped back in that, right? So the only way to salvation is through Jesus, sort of thing.
well, and they don't even see it at Yeshua. They don't see it that way. They see it as a man, and that is another a subliminal way to get people to worship themselves by virtue of that man, not accepting the idea that it was not the man, it was the spiritual aspects of the being that's supposed to be.
Well, I think the best you could say is they weren't fully aware that that's what they were doing, but you could say there were certainly been elements that wanted to do it that way for
Oh yeah,
purposes of control, structure, blah, blah, blah.
and that's where you get the whole concept of Pope, pastor, bishop, those kinds of things from. Not that they are wrong in terms of what they are, but they're wrong in terms of the way it's practiced. Because the practice of it is foreign to the scriptures. Because the scriptures are not about controlling and manipulating. It's about you being responsible for yourself.
I mean, but it tells you why they can. It's like Einstein said, the thinking that created the atomic bomb, so to speak, is not the thinking that will find the freedom from that horror that creates. It's another level thing. So the church won't fix itself, right? Ultimately, they can't get out of that. certainly.
So what the story of Ruth says is that instead of putting things in the box, it has opened that box up. It has literally opened the access up for all people. And again, we try to put labels on people nowadays and we say whoever, but what it did when they referred back to Pharez, who Tamar bore unto Judah, they were saying, okay, that's important. Boaz's father, Salmon, married Rahab, but Boaz came from that union. And so out of darkness does come light. Light is in darkness. So instead of being judgmental, because that's what we've done over the years, and that's part of putting it back in the box, putting our own explanations and judgments around things, and confining people to hell or wherever it is we think we send them, and we have no power to do so. They do it themselves or not. But we get that teaching that, if they don't come through the name of Jesus, well, Abraham sent his son Ishmael to the east, and he gave him gifts as well. He gave him some of the same knowledge, word, that he gave Isaac. Now, through the years, they've begun to do some other things and define, but if you go back to the essence, the root of the truth is the same. We all have the spark of the divine in us. That's the root of it.
I don't know, maybe it's just the way I'm playing with this or see a little bit, but my sense is then, if the story you just said, if the myth, whatever you want to call it, and meaning the understanding that comes with the story, was understood in the way that you're characterizing it, looking back to the story with what you understand now, why do we need a Messiah?
Because you got to understand it because you're it.
No, but the point was, the awareness would have been freed. But it was still at a point in history where it was this point plus this experience plus this culminating. You know what I'm trying to say? It was still a building thing. So we could do it for Ruth and Boaz, etc. Go, oh yeah. But then there's still the other.
It was still not seeing the whole, not connecting the dots and seeing the whole.
Mm-hmm. So it was sort of saying that there's still going to need to be this journey that has to take place, culminating in, right? And that's basically what Jesus said.
All right. So in a nutshell,
And the universal.
Boaz married Ruth. She conceived.
Say that in church.
She had a son called Onan, whose name is servant, or serving, or service.
You got this.
And then the women blessed Naomi and said, "Blessed be the Lord, which has not left you this day without a kinsman. His name may be famous." They said, "May his name be famous in Israel." And so even though Boaz did what he did for Naomi's son, his name not to be blotted out, he got something out of the deal spiritually.
Oh, okay.
His name was not forgotten. And so it ends in verse 18. It says, these are the generations of Pharez. Pharez, the son of Judah, and Tamar, his daughter-in-law. And it goes all the way down the line through Salmon, who was Boaz's dad, who with Rahab begat Boaz. And Boaz and Ruth, the Moabitess, who was in the lineage of Lot, and his daughter begat Obed. And Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse was the father of David. And it's through David's lineage that the Mary was born, the mother of the Messiah. So out of all of that, Now, if the Messiah can come out of that lineage, why do we try to be judgmental of people? So judgmental of people.
And
It's
ourselves.
supposed to be freeing.
Why are you worried about an immaculate conception?
Well, people got a problem with Jesus having sex. But,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a whole nother story.
yeah, that's a whole new story. But that in a nutshell is saying to us, if you're a holy roller, you missed it. If you are demeaning someone because they're a prostitute, you missed it. You missed the whole thing. If you're looking down on someone because they're weedy or cracky, you missed it. Jesus came out of that. Righteousness comes out of that. Light comes out of that. So what happened? I suppose when you think that you've arrived, you're actually on the sidelines. Think and the more that you think that you've arrived, the longer you stay on the sideline. That's this particular congregation that I'm very, very familiar with. From time to time, I drop in. And when I drop in, I see exactly the same thing, but I also hear the same thing. A condemnation of Muslims, drug addicts, homosexuals, etc. As opposed to recognizing that it is through the lineage of these things, these attributes, that Jesus came.
That the Redeemer,
Yeah.
who said cover, crackhead cover, prostitute cover.
So they're really the barley, and the holy rollers are more or less the wheat or the grapes.
Of the chair.
Hey,
Oh,
yeah, some of them
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
who think they are the righteous.
And that's why we have to emphasize that regardless of what you understand, what you're aware of, the greater your awareness is, the less you look down on anyone. You cannot look at, one thing that I detest is, or if someone says to me, are you a word church? What the hell does that mean? I'm not a word, are you a word church? Now, what's that supposed to mean? How do you reply to that?
You say no,
I
because
say,
it depends on their definition of what a word church
Yeah.
is.
I mean,
And
you nicer than I am.
I know.
Yeah, because I be asking.
That's why you had
Number 16.
we had to be ground.
That's why we're here, because we need to be grounded.
Yeah.
2 ways, grinding.
Grounded.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm thinking there's another way to look at this lineage, and I don't know if it's right, but if these different people and attributes represent thoughts inside of us, what does that mean, that you go through these types of thoughts before you get to redemption, before you become Messiah?
It means that you have the opportunity. Thoughts just come, but you have the opportunity to decide on what you're going to give life to by thinking on it, meditating on it, and acting on it as if it were there. Hitler had the opportunity to give life to hate and persecution, and he did. Hitler read esoterically what was going on, but he chose not to act on light, but that unrightness, that evilness. That's what he chose to manifest. We have the same opportunities. All of that is in us. It doesn't just get lost somewhere. It's still in us. Think of the decisions we make sometimes. Sometimes some of them are not as good as some of the other ones, or not as right as some of the others, because we make a choice. But that's still in us. We still have that. And that's what Elimelech was saying. That's what this was saying to us about Elimelech. Even the Redeemer has not only God as my king, but he also has the other stuff. So it's a choice. It's what we choose to bring and give physical life to. Because the
Power.
spiritual life is in here already.
Yeah, it's, Pastor talked about all the voices, they're still there.
Mm-hmm.
And in conventional therapy, you gotta get the client to lay out on the table everything that's inside them. Don't deny anything. Otherwise, it can control you, distort you, right?
You get paid very well just to do that. Go ahead.
Well, it's just because that's the way we say something's credible. If it's free, it's worth what you paid for it, right?
So are there any questions about what we've talked about in terms of this book? And I'm sure when we go back and look at it another time, it'll be a whole nother layer, particularly when we overlay the festivals on top of that, when somebody does that one day. Everything we look at, you can like an onion peel a different layer of understanding. So that you can't take your initial layer of understanding and think you got it, and think that's it, and think that's the only way that you can interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not.
Well, it's wherever you want to stop on the journey.
That's right. It's where you choose to stop on the journey. And where you choose to stop on the journey is how you try to then cementize and concretize the thought at this process of the journey.
But I think we said a long time ago, the important thing is to be honest, intent on taking the journey. And stop wherever you want to stop. The trick is don't judge somebody else. If you're gonna run the whole marathon and after 7 kilometers they decide, okay, that's all I'm doing. Just, okay, great, I'm going on.
Or are you going to stand there and say, da 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 da,
Yeah, you
you
win.
stop the race, and not know that you stopped to stop? And when you're doing that, you stop. when you stop and say, da 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 da.
You stop too.
Well, and then you gotta carry all that with you while you start up and run again. Right?
It's right. More
You
baggage.
gotta get started again.
More baggage.
Yeah, so.
Okay. I hope you learned something different from this book than you knew before. I know I did.
Yeah.
And there's so much, much, much more. There's so much more. Anything else today? We're so glad you're home, Sheldon. Have a great, great break.
You did.
Is it over with already? Well, anyway,
So you've been among us without letting us know?
amongst us.
Amongst us?
Kind of, not the
You've been
entire
a
time.
monk amongst us? What are you?
And Kevin, we're so happy to have you stop by today.
I enjoyed it.
Stop by anytime. We're here. Anything else? Okay.
It was just one of the
Yeah.
Todd Malachi that he had. He wrote, "In the internal realm there is being, and in this world there is becoming. In truth, all in a mystery. Being and becoming are inseparable from one another. Being is becoming, and becoming is being. In that being is eternal and infinite, so also becoming is eternal, infinite. Without end and soft, the bornless being within us exists in a continuum of ever becoming, and that being is infinite potential. And therefore there's always the evermore we can be and become. This is the truth of the divine spark, the Yachai within us, the divine I am, the divine I shall be. Recognizing and realizing this, there's perfect peace and joy and liberation."
So that just simply tells me to live truthfully and genuinely in the now.
Yeah, that made me think of something he said, liberation. Rahab, one of the meanings of her name was liberation.
Oh, you went back and looked.
No, I looked for
You remember?
Ron during the week,
Okay.
yeah.
I
That just
wondered what it
triggered
was.
that.
Okay.
It means, yeah.
Liberation from what is related to Rahab? Box thinking?
But yes, she liberated the,
I know she helped them.
when you look at who she liberated,
Mm-hmm.
Joshua,
So she had a hand in,
liberating Yeshua,
mhm.
because that's what Joshua is.
Wow.
So, out of the womb of a prostitute came Jesus.
Okay, if there's nothing else,
They're definitely gonna burn you at the stake.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that came from the lineage.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, but you couldn't have said that 400 years ago. True.
Ah, okay. The truth of the light that we are, and the light of truth that we are, has us to know that we are all kinsmen redeemers for each other.
Amen.